так сказать, темные в особенности.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to SHOUTcraft America. It is the round of 8. The quarterfinals are upon us. We've had 4 great group stages, but now things are getting real. There is more money on the line. There is, of course, access to the round of 4 and even a shot at getting through to the grand finals, which will be held in New York. And both players will be flown out at MLG's expense to go and compete in the studio. Should be a really fun event. My name is Totalbiscuit, and today I'm joined by special guest caster Greg Idrafields. Welcome to the show.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
It's all good. It's all good. So, we haven't heard you cast in quite some time, if I recall correctly. When was the last event that you were involved in? Was it a Masters Cup?
Probably would be. The last live event I casted was the NASL Finals with In Control up in Toronto. So that was quite a few months ago. So the last thing was probably the Masters Cup series, yeah.
Fantastic. Now, things have changed a little bit, obviously, over the past couple of weeks for you. You've changed your focus. You recently announced that you've basically retired as a competitive player, but you are still part of the StarCraft scene as a player, a caster, and a personality.
Yeah, that's true. Competitive gaming just wasn't really satisfying me anymore. I wanted to move on to new stuff, and my casting has always gotten a lot of positive feedback. It's really fun, and it seems like a good application of everything I've picked up over the years of playing, so I felt like that was the next natural step for me.
Sounds fantastic. Well, we will be seeing whether or not that's the case, because you're going to be casting the round of 8. Now, all of these guys are players that you've faced in the past.
Yeah, pretty much everyone. Everyone obviously from North America, so they all play on the North American ladder, so we practice against each other day in and day out. And actually, a lot of them are more new, upcoming players who haven't played a ton of big tournaments in the past, so I don't have a lot of tournament experience against them. And we haven't seen a lot from a lot of them.
Yeah.
But they are the players I get to play just regularly on ladder, so I do know quite a bit about how they play and how they handle the game.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about this tournament, I think, is that we do see a lot of players that don't compete an awful lot in these tournaments. And it's weird because when they do, they often play in a really different way. You expressed surprise before the show, actually. We were talking a little bit about Drunken Boy's play being one of only 2 players to actually advance through their group stage without dropping a map. And you were quite surprised to hear that he did that with macro games, pretty much nothing but macro games.
Yeah, a lot of the times you'll get more established players, like Minigun, for instance. If you watch his groups games, they're exactly what you expect from him. They're completely in line with his normal style. But Drunken Boy, he's much more of him, and Hello Kitty and all the other newer players. They are much more of they have much more of a wild card factor, just because everyone's not experienced with the full range of their play. Like, you get them on ladder, you get them in some tournaments, they'll do the normal cheesy stuff that you expect from them. But then, obviously, no one really knows exactly what they can do because no one's seen all that much from them. And so then every once in a while they can bust out a macro game and just beat some of the top players in the tournament in the group stage, like exactly what happened with Drunken Boy.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. And you, as a player who has competed in a metric ton of tournaments, and yet you do a ton of ladder practice as well. For those uninitiated, can you explain the biggest differences between competing on ladder and competing in a tournament format?
It's not, since this is an online tournament up until the finals, it's not as big of a deal, but normally in competitive play, nerves become a very big factor, especially for some inexperienced players like what we're going to be seeing today. With the exception of, even Minigun actually has a lot of problems with nerves online, or at offline tournaments. A lot of the players here don't have a ton of tournament experience, and usually the biggest factor for newer players like that is the nerves and dealing with the competition, because there's a very big difference between sitting in your room playing ladder games, no pressure, sometimes not even viewership, and then you go up on stage or you go on a platform like this and you're playing for thousands of dollars and for the recognition of all of your fans and whatnot. And especially right now, like, these are people who are competing for a fan base to push them forward into this kind of new era of American StarCraft that's coming forward with WCS and then great tournaments like SHOUTcraft and whatnot. So this is like a very important time for these up-and-coming players to prove themselves, and that's a ton of pressure that they're not used to dealing with if they're normally just ladder players. So gameplay-wise, if they're smart, they're going to do what they're comfortable with. They're not going to let themselves be bullied by emotion and nerves and whatnot. But the biggest thing is just going to be trying to maintain the level of play they're capable of throughout all the extra pressure that they're going to be under.
Absolutely. That sounds like a really great piece of insight into the kind of mindset that these guys are going to have to be dealing with. And we have a mixture of players that have some tournament experience and those that really, really do not. And I think that's exemplified reasonably well by the first matchup, which will be Puck versus Gosu User. And I'd certainly say that Gosu User definitely has more, certainly offline tournament experience, especially lately. He was one of the players that competed in MLG Dallas and was actually able to some degree, stand up to a Korean opponent, although he was not able to defeat him. He did take a map from him. And then, of course, we have Root Puck, who does compete in online events, but not so many offline events. And I think it's probably safe to say that they don't have... he doesn't have as much tournament experience as Gosu User.
No, Puck has been going to MLGs a decent amount, but he was always mostly a bracket player. It hasn't really had too much success. Occasionally taking a series or at least a map off a good established player, but not really never making it into the group stages or anything like that. And not even competing too much online because there haven't been that many big online tournaments in the past in Wings of Liberty. Whereas Gosu User, still kind of a newer face to the scene, not someone a lot of international fans might recognize just yet, but he's actually been having quite a bit of success. He played in the EG Kingston tournament, where he beat quite a few good players and was actually one of the few who qualified for the offline finals in the first place. And then he's always had a little bit of success at MLGs, knocking out good players here and there, and like you said, qualifying for this last one. So he definitely has the experience advantage, but neither of these is like a hardened veteran, but I would definitely have to give the edge to Gosu User in terms of that.
Definitely. We'll have a look at the bracket before we go into the first face-off interview between these two players. I'd like to remind everyone, of course, that SHOUTcraft.com is your information source for this tournament, and is also the place where, if you so desire, you can toss a couple of dollars the way of the players in the form of a tip via the PayPal tip jar, which is always very much appreciated by the players, and it's a really great way to support the pros that are putting out plays that you enjoy, or just players that you think really do deserve that financial support. If you're willing to tip your wager, then as far as I'm concerned, you should be willing to tip your StarCraft pros. Now, we'll have a look at the bracket here. The first matchup, of course, is going to be Puck versus Gosu User. That is Root versus Millennium. And then we will go down, and the next matchup, I think, to me, this is the matchup of the round of 8, in my honest opinion. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Kane versus QXC. Kane comes into this tournament with a huge amount of hype.
Yeah, for a long time he was one of the top ranked players on the North American ladder, and he's. I'm not honestly sure where a lot of the hype has come from. I think it's mostly from the fact that he actually doesn't play too many tournaments. He doesn't go to a lot of MLGs. He's still a really young kid in school and whatnot, so he doesn't have time to really compete a ton. But everyone knows he's good, knows he performs well on ladder, knows he beats these top players on ladder. But they haven't gotten to see him do that yet, and that kind of mystery around him creates a lot of hype. So everyone definitely wants to see him play. And then as for the matchup, it's going to kind of depend on which QXC comes, because QXC is a very versatile player. He has a ton of different styles. And he pulls everything out from either really weird stuff like his Mass Widowmine style that's gotten a lot of attention to just straight up generic play turtle mech. He can do pretty much anything, and sometimes it looks amazing, and sometimes it just falls flat on his face because the opponent happens to figure out what weird thing he's doing and counter it. So it could either be amazing or Kane. I think it's honestly entirely possible that Kane could just roll over him.
Yeah, we actually saw QXE play in the group stage yesterday, and he looked shakier than I would have expected. I think going into that group, most people would have said QXE was the favorite.